I nod and smile and quietly dismiss people who say, violence is never the answer. Let's face it. I mean, you read the bio. I have a PhD in violence. Violence, particularly righteous violence, has solved every problem that man has been faced with, has protected more people. It was great violence. World War II was great violence, but it saved the remnants of the Jews and established them in a new country. Mr. Penny in New York, through an act of violence, although his intent was not to kill, but his intent was to protect, and the adversary died at that point. Violence was the only thing that kept more people from being victimized, righteous violence. So I understand the sentiment, but the reality is far from the truth. And I think, Orwell, when he said, we sleep safe in our beds at night because rough men stand ready to visit violence upon those who would do us harm. That's the truth. That's the truth of every day. And people like you and people who attend my classes, people who train, people who keep their skills up, special operators who keep their skills up when they transition to the civilian world and quietly go about their day, the true quiet professionals, they're still ready to visit violence upon those who would do everyone else harm.
Very well said. This is good. This is good.
Within the operator world, especially at the highest levels, faith is an underpinning foundational necessity. And you have to give yourself to something bigger than you. If you are focused on you, there's no way you're going to do things like kick doors and go into rooms where people with AK-47s are on the other side waiting to kill you. You have to be committed to something bigger. Then the other thing is you have to be comfortable with death. And if you have an abiding faith and you know what comes after mortal death, you're going to be strengthened and fortified in combat. And so you'll tend to see this. That old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
I saw a fair amount of that. I'm not saying everybody was that way, and I'm not saying everybody's behavior was truly Christian. I'm not saying, but you will find threaded throughout the SWAT community and threaded throughout the special operations community, you'll find a significant bedrock of faith, Christian faith.
I am so glad I asked the question now. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Okay, well, let's start at the beginning because I've never met you before and I want the audience to know your background because it's quite extensive. So you guys, you're watching the show tonight, but it's in a little bit different format because we had to jump over on Zoom because our other platform wasn't working correctly. So Randy gets to sit in and watch me read his bio, uncomfortably sit here while I do that. But I think it's important for all of us. So we get background information on Randy. And I'm really, really excited to dive in with some of the topics we're going to cover. But first, let's start at the beginning. And this is quite a long bio, but I think it's important that this all gets read. So bear with me, guys, as I go through this. So Randy Watt is a retired chief of police of Ogden, Utah Police Department with 36 years of service. He worked many assignments throughout his career, including 13 years with SWAT and 7 years as lead firearms trainer, a lifelong martial artist. Chief Watt was also lead instructor for defensive tactics and arrest control for the Utah Post. He received many awards and commendations during his career, other than OPD, including twice being awarded the department's Medal of Valor as a result of his expertise and experience. He is a national level trainer for the National Tactical Officers Association, as well as for numerous state associations. He's an expert in use of force, defending law enforcement officers and agencies in criminal and civil litigation, and recently was a key witness in overturning the Illinois firearm and accessories ban. His testimony was cited 17 times in that court's decision. He's also a retired colonel in the Utah Army National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group Airborne, with 34 years enlisted and officer service as an active duty and National Guard Green Beret. Randy commanded at all levels of Army Special Forces, including ODA, company, battalion, and group. He is a master parachutist and a military free fall parachutist with 3 one-year tours in the GWAT commanding counterterrorism and counterinsurgency units. His combat awards include the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Bronze Star Medal with V device. We might have to ask him what that means. 3 Bronze Star medals, the Iraq Campaign Medal with 3 stars, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal with 2 stars, and the GWAT I'm really butchering this, Randy. Expeditionary and Service Medals. He is a graduate of the U.S. Army's Resident War College and currently, Randy, is the president and CEO of SRW Incorporated, a specialized training and consulting company. He started in 2008. He is a range master at the renowned Gunsight Academy in Paulden, Arizona, having been on staff there since 2005. He is the author of One Warrior's Creed, written in the closing days of his 2006-2007 tour of Baghdad, and has authored numerous articles for a variety of publications. He is also a principal partner in the Power of Awareness Institute, which we're going to talk about, and that is an online personal safety training program. I mean, Randy, this would be a lot easier to say, what haven't you done, rather than what have you done? This is remarkable.
I've been blessed with a lot of experiences. I sometimes say that I've lived the life of 3 different people in the years I've been here on Earth.
I think so. And I'm sorry if I didn't get some of the pronunciations correct.
You were fine. You were absolutely fine.
I did my best. That's all that I can do. It's hard to know where to begin with you, but I would like to begin with something that you sent me, which was really quite a powerful thing for me to read. And I would like to read it to the audience as well, if you don't mind. And we can discuss you call it One Warrior's Creed. Is it okay if I read that to the audience?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then we can discuss it afterwards. This is called One Warrior's Creed, written by Randy Watt. If today is to be the day, so be it. If you seek to do battle with me this day, you will receive the best that I am capable of giving. It may not be enough, but it will be everything that I have to give, and it will be impressive. For I have constantly prepared myself for this day. I have trained, drilled, and rehearsed my actions so that I might have the best chance of defeating you. I have kept myself in peak physical condition, schooled myself in the martial skills, and become proficient in the application of combat tactics. You may defeat me, but you will pay a severe price, and will be lucky to escape with your life. You may kill me, but I am willing to die if necessary. I do not fear death, for I have been close enough to it on enough occasions that it no longer concerns me. But I do fear the loss of my honor, and would rather die fighting than to have it said that I was without courage. So, I will fight you, no matter how insurmountable it may seem, and to the death if need be, in order that it may never be said of me that I was not a warrior. Woo! I didn't write that, but I felt that as I was reading it, Randy. That is powerful.
I felt it as you read it as well. I wrote that about 3 weeks prior to the end of my one-year tour in Baghdad. I was the counterterrorism advisor to the Iraqi National Counterterrorism Unit. We were operating out of a place called Fob Shield in the Red Zone next to the Ministry of Interior. I had a small counterterrorism advisory team that worked directly with the Iraqis, and we lost a few of our guys. And when we lost the last one, Phil, Commander Murphy Sweet from U.S. Navy, and at that time, I would tell you that Baghdad, 0607 was a really tough place to be. And we were losing 50, 60 Americans a month, 700 IEDs a day in the city. the war was being very poorly fought and run, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the senior U.S. leadership in those days there. When I left, I had served in Afghanistan in 01, 02, right from the start. I got to Afghanistan in December of 01 and was commanding a Special Forces company downrange. And that was a very solid mission, and that was very rewarding. I did lose some guys there as well. But Baghdad was being very poorly fought, very, very ugly scenario. The Iraqis did not want us there. The Iraqis were using our equipment, using our training, using our vehicles to commit extrajudicial killings of other Iraqis and doing a wide variety of things. And our senior leadership was failing to recognize and implement policies that were designed to accomplish U.S. military objectives. So it was very disheartening. I almost resigned my commission when I came home from Baghdad. I came home with a lot of baggage.
Did you write this when you got home?
No, I wrote it about 3 days before. After Phil died, a couple of days after Phil was killed by an Iranian-made EFP, explosively formed penetrator in Baghdad. We were on a mission. We were on an operation. Phil and part of the team were on an operation. We lost Phil that day. We lost 2 former British SAS operators in the same vehicle that was hit. So we were at a little memorial service for Phil, and one of the State Department employees who is civilians who met with Iraqi leaders and so on, who knew us because occasionally we provided security for her. She asked, "Why do you guys do this?" Looking at what happened, and that question bothered me for a couple of days. And I was being quite reflective, and I was thinking back on all the SWAT guys that I'd gone in harm's way with, and all the Green Berets and SEALs and Air Force Special Operators, and over the years, and all the cross training with British SAS, Australian SAS, all the people, but in particular, all my good friends in law enforcement. In SWAT is the equivalent of the Tier 1 side, the good SWAT teams, the equivalent of Tier 1 side, and of course my team was out there, very experienced, and others. And I thought, how would I explain us? And how would I explain what motivates us? And so I thought about it for a couple of days. I sat down, and that actually came fairly quickly. I had read a little earlier Stephanie Shugart, the wife of then Sergeant First Class Randall Shugart, Medal of Honor recipient for the Battle of Mogadishu in rescuing the downed helo pilot. And his wife had said, "It takes a real man to live a creed, not just say one." Mm. And as I was writing this, and it took very little time, I was just thought, okay, I'm going to go about explaining who we are and what we do. And I wrote that. And when I got back, I was doing a lot of presentations and speaking engagements over the next few years to various SWAT associations and so on. And I had little posters made up and had some T-shirts with some good art on the back that said "Living the Creed," and it got a lot of mileage. But and then when Border Patrol agent Terry was killed down on the border a number of years ago, you may remember when Brian Terry was killed. In his bag, in his gear bag, they found a handwritten copy of that. And initially, they thought he had written it.
Wow.
I have had, and he. It turned out he had attended one of my seminars, and he had written that down, and he carried it with him in his tactical gear bag. I can't even tell you how many SWAT cops and patrol cops who have called me and said, "Hey, I have that on a card. I have it above my visor. I read it every night when I go to work." I've even seen it painted on a full wall mural in a SWAT bay of a major SWAT team. They have it painted on the wall. Wow. It defines, it is our creed. When it says one warriors being possessive with an apostrophe, it's my creed. It's what I live. It's what I embody. It's who I am. Even at my age, I'm still in the gym first thing in the morning. I still roll twice a week. I still strike twice a week. I fire 25, 30,000 rounds a year. I'm carrying everywhere I go because I don't know if I could live with myself if my community or my family or friends ever needed me and I wasn't ready. And that's where One Warrior's Creed comes from. That's the history.
Was the creed inspired by Phil originally, or was it just inspired by everyone you knew that was
I think Phil was, the death of Commander Phil Murphy Sweet was the catalyst that caused me to bring that out and put it on paper. Yeah.
Was there something unique about him or special about him to you that you felt like this needed to be done?
Yeah, it was the absolute utter worthlessness of his death. Mm. It was the absolute utter worthlessness of the cause there, of how poorly the war was being run. It was so frustrating. It was hard to live. through, and there were so many other things. Phil wasn't the only guy we lost there. Anyway, so that just inspired that, and then it kind of took a little bit of a life of its own. And I've kind of downplayed it the last years, but it's still out there, and I still believe in it. And it's still how I live my life.
And if you want to look at that creed, you guys, you can go to warriorcreed.us, and that's where you
Right.
can find that creed so you can read it for yourself. I think that's a powerful way to begin this interview because I think that it overshadows and is a good umbrella for everything that we're going to be talking about today. And I appreciate you sharing where that came from because there's often a story behind the story,
Mm-hmm.
and that is definitely an amazing. As I read it out loud, I really felt it. So thank you for doing that.
You're quite
I
welcome.
think a lot of people feel that way. And even though I've never been in military or law enforcement, there are a lot of things that really sit with me when I read that. And so I don't think that that's limited to military or law enforcement, but I do think there are a lot of other people that feel the same way as well.
Yeah, it's not limited. The thousands of citizens I've trained over the years in firearms or defensive tactics, um, many of them embody this same thing. I had a woman in Canada who runs a nonprofit, a cancer nonprofit, call me one day and said, "This is back when I used to make posters." And she said, "I would like to buy 200 of your posters. I really think this embodies cancer survivors." And hers focused on women and breast cancer.
Mm,
And she said, I've had several of our ladies read this and they love it. They feel it gives them some energy to continue the fight.
yeah.
And I didn't even charge her. I said, "Her 200 posters."
Aw, that
So
says a lot about you, Randy.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's
So
amazing.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I didn't ask you before the show if we could go here or not, but if you don't want to, we won't. I'm just curious if this creed, how much, like we talk about in this community being prepared for any situation, and it talks about that on your website as well. And we're going to talk about
Hmm.
a lot of those things, same things about preparedness throughout the show. But I wonder, given the experience that you've had and so many things that you've seen and gone through, I'm just curious as to what your the way that you look at this creed as it relates to faith, meaning how much of your day to day or the struggles that you go through or the ones that you've been through has having a faith in anything bigger than yourself helped you get through those times, I guess, because I just wonder if that's a component or not.
So I, and I don't mind talking about it.
Okay.
I am the product of two incredible forces in this world. The first is, and they're not, one's not higher than the other. They're just two forces. The first is, 44 and a half years ago, I married the most incredible woman God put on this earth.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and she's been everything I've been through, she's been a part of, right?
Oh,
And she's been what has shored me up and has helped me recover through all of this. I have no greater supporter
wow.
and no greater support system. The second is the relationship I have with my Heavenly Father and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That has saved me a couple of times. In 2007, about 5 months after I came back from Baghdad, I came within seconds of taking my own life, and
Wow.
and it was a still small voice that stopped me,
Wow.
and I began seeking help. I first uh, went to my wife, who then helped me get more help. Um, and both of my careers continued after that point. The stigma of being in that situation still was worrisome because I continued on to command to two more commands in the army, and I continued on to become a chief of police. Um, those things, given the time frame, 2007, those things might not have occurred. Either one might not have occurred if I had made it known or if it had become known that I had struggled with
Mm,
suicidal ideation.
hmm.
So now here we are, as we've learned to deal with that. Special Operations Command has learned to deal with it. Law enforcement learned to deal with it. We now have programs in place. I instituted some tremendous new programs when I was chief of police in order to deal with this stuff. Um, Now it's not the same, but 2007 was a different time, and we were really just learning what was going on with veterans and what was going on with law enforcement officers. We had turned a blind eye to it for years.
Hmm.
Now I have full faith and confidence that people could deal with these things and they would not be affected. Their careers would not be affected, but it was not that way in 2007.
Wow. 44 years.
44 and a half. It'll be 45 in May.
That is, now correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that quite uncommon within law enforcement and military?
Yeah, especially when we put the two together. It is.
Yes.
It is.
So I have to ask you how? What do
I'll
you
tell you
think?
how.
Yeah, please
I'll
do.
tell you the success to a long and happy marriage. Shared goals wrapped in faith. Shared
Oh,
goals. You're both going to the same place, going in the same direction, and bound by faith. It doesn't have, and I'm not saying anything denominational. I'm not saying anything, but I'm a big believer in Christianity and the power of Christians. But I think that's a key component. I saw a statistic here not long ago that less than it was one of these studies that had been done by a university that said less than 5% of the couples who pray together every night get divorced. I think it's powerful. So
so do
I
you guys
can't I
pray
can't
together?
verify that. Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, okay, let's go. I have to go down a side thing for just a
Okay,
minute. For just a
sure.
minute. Ah, because this, I just can't believe this because I was just thinking about this last night. I watched this little video thing. It was on Facebook or whatever, a reel, and it was saying kind of the same thing. And I thought to myself, it was talking about praying out loud too, and
Hmm.
how at first it's difficult to do that because you're not used to doing it. I was just baptized earlier this year, and
Hmm.
so I'm a new Christian, and that's one of the things I struggle with is praying out loud. And they said to just start with just saying grace at before a meal around the kitchen table,
Hmm.
and then just go from there. But one of the most emotionally intimate things you can do is to pray with someone,
I
and
agree.
especially your spouse. And I would love that. And so just my own personal I just really want to know for myself, how would you begin to do that? Or is it just like everything else, you just start small and just keep going?
You just start doing it. My recommendation would be that when you're about to get into bed, you're both there. You just take your spouse by the hand and say, kneel down by the bed with me and let's pray together. And what we do is we alternate nights, right? I pray one
Oh.
night, she prays the next, back and forth. Yeah, just
Do
try
you
it.
have like do you guys pray together? Like do you have any special time in the morning when you get up where you guys end the
Our
word?
schedules are so different.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but
I know some couples
we
do that.
pray, we'll pray together when we're about to drive away on a trip. Like if we're going to drive from here down to our daughter in New Mexico, or down to our daughter, and we've got another daughter that's about 2.5 hours away. We'll pray before we'll sit in the cab of the truck and have a prayer together. And
And it's been this way your whole marriage.
it didn't, no,
Okay.
it took time to get into this.
Okay.
Our faiths were at different levels.
Okay.
And my wife is the spiritual giant in my family.
Yeah.
And it took her a while to draw me up to her level, but yeah, I will tell you that I don't know why this isn't realized or spoken of more often, but I think young women truly they don't understand the power they have for shaping men's lives.
Hmm.
And I like to say I laughingly say that my wife has successfully raised 5 children, 4 she gave birth to and 1 she married, and but there's a grain of truth in this. There's a significant grain of truth in it.
Wow, Randy, I have to tell you, I didn't know what to expect, but I'm blown away and so grateful.
So let me tell you a story.
Okay, please do.
You're familiar with Delta Force.
Yeah.
So you probably have talked to some of those lads. Great guys, by the way. And Delta, the U.S. Army Delta, they are my opinion, I've worked with all of them. DevGru, CAG, as Delta is known, different SEAL teams, Air Force Special Operations teams, foreign, including British and Australian SAS, German units, French units. I've worked with many of them. Had the opportunity to train with many. Served in combat alongside the Australian SAS. We worked joint ops together. Delta are the best in the business. They're all good. They're all really good at what they do. But Delta is the best in business. So let me tell you a funny story. I had a Delta unit working next to me in Afghanistan. And they have their own separate tent. You're not allowed to go over there. They don't secure area and so on. But they needed assistance from my stuff. I was in command of the region. They have their own chain of command, but the standard Special Operations Force command structure, I was in charge of that region, Paktia province, part of Paktika, and all of Host province. And I was located in Host or Coast or Koust, as some say it. So they had their own walled tent with some sandbag walls, and they had their own communications equipment stuff set up in there. And one morning, Troop Sergeant Major, came over to get me. He said, "Sir, I need you to take a look at some intelligence with me, if you would." And he said, "I need you to come onto our compound." And I said, okay, I'm happy to do that. And so they take me over there. Well, we walk into, you have to walk through the living area. And these are the toughest men I know. In fact, we in an operation not too many weeks after that, we lost one of them on a joint operation in combat. Anyway, as I walk into their tent and walking through, they're sitting in a circle. Right, there's 5 or 6 of them sitting in a circle on this wooden floor that we'd made to put the tents on, and they're having Bible study.
No kidding.
No kidding. And they're 5 or 6 of them, and they're from different faiths. I find out later, there's a Catholic, there's an Episcopalian, there's several various Christian sects there, but they're having Bible study. They think it's important. And by the way, I didn't realize it until I saw that it was Sunday, because every day, but within the operator world, especially at the highest levels, faith is an underpinning foundational necessity, and you have to give yourself to something bigger than you. If you are focused on you, there's no way you're going to do things like kick doors and go into rooms where people with AK-47s are on the other side waiting to kill you. You have to be committed to something bigger. Then the other thing is you have to be comfortable with death. And if you have an abiding faith and you know what comes after mortal death, you're going to be strengthened and fortified in combat. And so you'll tend to see this. That old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
I saw a fair amount of that. I'm not saying everybody was that way, and I'm not saying everybody's behavior was truly Christian. I'm not saying, but you will find threaded throughout the SWAT community and threaded throughout the special operations community, you'll find a significant bedrock of faith, Christian faith.
I'm so glad I asked the question now. I almost didn't ask the question, Randy. Oh, I'm on my own journey here, so that was really validating for me that I did the right thing there. Yeah.
I'm pleased to hear that you were baptized. That's sometime we'll have to have a conversation about that, other than today.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to ask one more, I guess you'd call it faith-based question before we move on to like where we were going before we went on the side trail here. And that is, again, it's my own just pure personal curiosity of, I know a lot of the stories in the Bible, but I wonder, are there any stories or a story in particular that speaks to a warrior mindset in the Bible that you can?
Well, there are many. Of course, there's David, King David, and there's some stuff related to King Saul prior to David coming into the picture. You can look back to the fall of the walls of Jericho. Most people don't realize this, but if you study the history behind what's happening at the time of the Bible, that when the Israelites crossed the River Jordan into the Promised Land, there were 40,000 Israeli soldiers who crossed first, because they had to deal with what was on the other side. They had to establish a foothold for their people, because it wasn't like anybody was going to welcome them back with open arms. It wasn't like, right? So there has always been this mortal world has always been in conflict. There's never been peace. I mean, it's a noble concept, but has never occurred. There have been little pockets of peace for periods of time. If you look at our history, it's a history of conflict. And you look at Peter swinging a sword and cutting off the ear of someone.
Yeah.
You look at times. I often I nod and smile and quietly dismiss people who say, violence is never the answer. Let's face it. I mean, you read the bio. I have a PhD in violence. Violence, particularly righteous violence, has solved every problem that man has been faced with, has protected more people. It was great violence. World War II was great violence, but it saved the remnants of the Jews and established them in a new country. Mr. Penny in New York, through an act of violence, although his intent was not to kill, but his intent was to protect, and the adversary died at that point. Violence was the only thing that kept more people from being victimized, righteous violence. So I understand the sentiment, but the reality is far from the truth. And I think, Orwell, when he said, we sleep safe in our beds at night because rough men stand ready to visit violence upon those who would do us harm. That's the truth. That's the truth of every day. And people like you and people who attend my classes, people who train, people who keep their skills up, special operators who keep their skills up when they transition to the civilian world and quietly go about their day, the true quiet professionals, they're still ready to visit violence upon those who would do everyone else harm.
Very well said. This is good. This is good. Hey guys, I want to offer you something that is a personal touch, something special that I can share with you to help you grow and develop along this journey in this path as a defender. And what I'm offering is a monthly live call that you can participate in. And we're going to be talking about the 4 areas that I believe all defenders of life should be strong in. And those are physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and training. So if you're interested in learning about those things and developing yourself throughout that journey, I'm here to help you. And I want my paid subscribers to have that personal touch of getting to talk with me one-on-one in this group call and sharing with others and encouraging others along this path. So if you'd like to get in on those calls, go to defenders-live.com, become a paid subscriber. I cannot wait to see you there. And thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live. I did not expect this, and I am so grateful for this interview. Okay, let me go down another territory here.
Sure.
Let's say that someone who's watching listened to me read One Warrior's Creed, and they thought in their hearts something spoke to them about it, and maybe they aren't yet in the self-defense community. What do you believe are some of the first steps towards the self-development of what you call a warrior? We call it a defender. You call a warrior.
Yeah.
It's almost like a calling, I think.
It is. So there's a saying that's attributed to Heraclitus, although I've never been able to find it. I've never been find where Heraclitus said it. So I don't know its origin. It's now 30, 35 years old. But I don't know if you recognize this, but the Greek army was a conscript army, right? You had the cohort, the main Greek army, but Greece was quite small. So they would conquer an area and they would levy that area for a certain amount of males based on the population, a certain amount of males between the ages of 15 and I believe it was 40. And they'd say, you owe us this many males to become soldiers for the Greek army. And so there were Greeks who were in charge of training these people and making them into warriors. There was a reason that in the phalanx, the first couple of rows were what they called the others. That's these conscripts. So the enemy would wear themselves out trying to get past those guys. Mm-hmm. And then that third rank would be the very professional, very highly skilled hoplite warriors. And so there's a reason that those things, there's a reason that the Greeks, the Romans, very, very similar nature, were the most successful armies in the war. Discipline, and other things, training, equipment, and so on. So what is attributed to Heraclitus was he's speaking one day, according to this, he's speaking one day to the general who's in charge of basic training. And this is what the general says. The general says, of every 100 men they send me, 80 are nothing more than targets and 10 shouldn't even be here. Of the remaining 10, 9 are fighters and we are glad to have them, for they the battle make. But the one is a warrior. And he I must find, for he will bring the others back and he the battle wins. Right? So wow. Let's kind of cut that there. So 10% of the population are willing to fight. 10% are willing to do what it takes. Of that 10%, there's 1% who are dedicated to what I believe to be a higher moral ground as a warrior than a fighter. So if you look historically, historians, I'm trying to think of one name, but they call the Americans who fought in the American Revolution, they call them the 3%ers. Because only 3% of the available male population actually volunteered and were willing to go to war to fight the British. The rest of the male population said, well, let's sit back and watch and see how this goes. Right? If you look across the history of war, the maximum amount of available males, because when we're looking historically, women didn't participate up until the last 20 years to the levels they're participating now. Even when I commanded special forces, I had command of a group, special forces group in 2011, summer of 2011 through December of 2013, so 2.5 years. There were no women in the line special forces units. Only a small percentage of individuals were willing to prepare themselves to defend others. And that's the way it has always been. Dave Grossman refers to, the difference between sheep and sheepdogs. And he doesn't intend that chic be a derogatory term. He just intends that people understand that the vast majority of the average individuals are not mentally prepared to become physically prepared to do this. Colonel Jeff Cooper, who the founder of Gunsight, he speaks of the combat triad. And the base of the triad is mindset. And then on one side, you've got gun handling, and on the other side, you've got marksmanship. So you have those. But the base, the foundation is mindset. And he says, paraphrasing, he's a prolific author, a brilliant man. But he says, that essentially, I'm paraphrasing, the day that you realize that it can be you is the day that will change your thoughts about preparing yourself to defend yourself. These days, we say you are your own first responder. And as a 36-year cop, I can tell you that's true. So the first thing that people have to do is they first have to recognize, yeah, you can be a victim. I don't care where you live. I don't care who you are. You could be a victim. So number two, if you can be a victim, then the next thought is, then therefore I have a responsibility to protect myself. And then that will go into, I now have a responsibility to protect those I care about. So it can't happen to me. Therefore, I have a responsibility to protect myself. Therefore, I have a responsibility to protect those I care about. And that's the foundation of a warrior mindset. That's the foundation of a defender mindset. And then how you go about that it is now a lifestyle. Once you do that, it's now a lifestyle. It's not something you do. It's something you are. Right. And that's a big difference.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for describing it in that way. That's perfect. That really resonates with me anyway. And I know a lot of our audience as well. So along those same lines, and before we get into it, I'm gonna ask you some questions about the Power of Awareness online course that you have and the book that you have. But before we get to that, I'm wondering if there is anything about this that resonates with you that you could speak to. And so far, everything I've said, you've definitely been like a dog with a bone. So it's been just wonderful. I wrote in my notes, how important is it for a person to really know themselves and be tested along these same lines? Because that has been a journey that I have been on over the last couple of years. And who I thought I was turned out to be a little bit different than who I actually am. Who I actually am is a lot stronger than I thought I was. A lot more courageous than I thought I was. But it's because I allowed myself to get uncomfortable and be tested. And so I'm just wondering that process, how important is that to really be solidified and tested as much as we can along this same, dialogue we're having about being a defender or being a warrior?
So you're talking about the very foundational exploration we do when we build operators. I don't care if you're a SWAT operator or you're a Tier 1 operator or you're a Green Beret or you're a SEAL. The first thing we do is we put people into an environment that tests them. The test is not whether or not they can do a specific thing. The test is whether or not they can overcome obstacles, fear, anxiety, the kinds of things that obstruct learning in high-stress skill sets and in high-stress environments. So an example is Special Forces assessment and selection. If you want to become a Green Beret, you're going to have been in the combat arms, mostly infantry, and you're going to go to this 21-day event. It's physically demanding. Therefore, it becomes mentally demanding because as the body wearies, the brain struggles. So, and then under stress, we're going to evaluate your ability to clearly think, your ability to handle that stress. But what we're looking for is, do you know where your boundaries are? Do you know if you have boundaries? Not boundaries, limitations. Do you know what your limitations are? And do you have limitations? And then how well do you work with others? Because there are no single heroes. Everybody's meshed together. In the law enforcement world, I started as a cop in 1979. So that's how far back it is. You weren't even born yet.
How did you know?
No, I can tell by looking at you. I
look
young
younger
lady.
than I am.
Okay. Well, I might be wrong, but I wouldn't be far off. As a trainer, we were amazed at the number of younger people, particularly in the later years in law enforcement, who had never been punched in the mouth. Right. And here they are in a law enforcement setting, learning to deal with violence others bring, and they have no understanding that they can take a hit. And they have no understanding that it's not life-threatening. They have no understanding of how to read an environment and understand. because they've never been in conflict. My generation, we grew up, conflict was in the sandbox. I mean, you began at a very young age understanding conflict, how it worked. It was mostly mental conflict. But, I got bullied when I was in grade school, and bullying was a little different than happens today. Today, it's, kind of harsh words. Back in those days, it was getting punched in the mouth by someone who was upset with you for something. And you could either throw hands or you could take it. And some days you just took it, and other days, look, you push the limit. You had to, and so it's a little different environment today because we've protected our youth from so much. The other piece that you mentioned, the key word is resilience. Most people do not know that they're resilient. Most people do not know that they can deal with anything if they're pushed hard enough. So in the operator world, in the martial arts, like I said, I started in martial arts when I think I was 13. I wrestled from junior high school up through my first 2 years of college. Most people don't understand that you can expend a lot of energy. You can be mentally crushed and still carry on because they've never been pushed to that level. When you start talking about defending yourself against violence, when you start talking about, okay, I'm going to be prepared to defend myself and defend family, you really ought to have an idea about your ability to deal with stress, keep a clear head, think tactically, do those kinds of things. And the only way you find that is by being trained, is by being put in scenarios. If you're truly situationally aware and you truly understand the power of your intuition, which is what the power of awareness is all about, if you truly understand those two things, you can, with a high degree of success, spot trouble before it ever involves you and remove yourself from the environment.
Ideal. Yeah.
And that's the key to it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
you did. Thank you. And that's a perfect segue into my next question. So let's talk about how situational awareness and intuition play a role in personal safety. I think that situational awareness, almost the phrase gets used so much that I don't think it's ever really expanded upon. And many times I've seen in interviews where people have talked about it, assuming that everybody knows what we're talking about. So
Right.
Could you expound on that a little bit, and
Sure.
then we'll talk about the book and the online course.
Right. So operators get a fair amount of training in this. And this is not something you learn intuitively. This requires training. Being situationally aware is more than just understanding what's around you. It's understanding your interaction with this environment and what your place is in it. So as things are unfolding around you based on the environment, you know where you fit, and you know and understand what is likely, what's next. You have an ability to analyze and evaluate the surrounding. I know you've met and talked with Steve Tarani. Steve has a good understanding of this. Dan Schilling, the author of the book, and my partner, another special operator, by the way, of some renown. It was a concept of, okay, look, people bandy this term about all the time, but they truly understand what it is. And that's the crux of the matter is, I can see what's going on around me. I can know I'm in this environment, right? But do I truly understand my interaction, my place in this environment, and what comes of that? Can I quickly analyze and look at, it's a way of life to me. So, I go into a restaurant, and without even deliberation, because now it's subconscious, it's developed a level of subconscious, but I will have evaluated very rapidly where my tertiary exits are, where my secondary exits are. I will have evaluated quickly everybody in the room and identified whether someone might be an immediate problem or future problem. I have evaluated where I'm going to sit. Just those, and it's just second nature. It requires no effort. That's not something you develop yourself. That requires specific training. That requires someone who's experiencing it to lead you through the process of developing true situational awareness.
Right. And one of the things that Steve talks about in Your Most Powerful Weapon is, I believe that was in that book, he talked about paying attention to what's out of place. And that was a hook for me because I'd never really thought of it that way. Can you explain that a little bit more about what that could look like?
Yeah. In the operator world, we call that anomalies.
Okay.
So very, very quickly, we establish what's a baseline behavior. What are the baseline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The baseline behaviors, baseline sounds, right? Lighting. And very, very quickly, we learn the rhythm of the area that we're in.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens is, once we've been trained and once we've been led through the exercises to develop this, anomalies will quickly stand out. So let me give you an example. So I was recently visiting a major city. Okay. So I walked out of my hotel and I had to walk. I was going to go. I went to I was having a meeting the next morning with a major corporation. So I got in that night, got to a hotel, very nice hotel downtown. I went to the maitre d's desk and I asked, I'd like a good Italian dinner, not too far, something like, do you have any recommendations? And he did. He gave me the name and he told me, go this way, then that way, then this way. He gave me the route. I said, okay, I think I can do that. So I walk out of the hotel and it is, it's not dusk yet. Okay, it's not dusk. It's still fairly well lit. The streetlights are not on. It's early evening. So I step out of the hotel, and it's a nice hotel. I look left, I look right, and I just pause for a moment, and I get the feeling. Now this is people everywhere. The rhythm of this, the sidewalks are packed. The rhythm here is very, very clear, very quickly. So I get into the traffic flow going in the direction I want to go, and people are passing, people are moving, and I'm very much enjoying what's around me, and there's nothing, popping up. I stop a couple of times and take a couple of pictures, just to, just notable sites. One was an older church building. So I then continue on my way, and my sixth sense. Okay, now the second most powerful tool is your intuition. My intuition has identified, my subconscious has identified an anomaly. And so I then take quick stock as I'm moving. I notice that in the flow of people behind me, there are two young males who are slightly off to my right, behind me about 3 or 4 people. And I realize they've been with me through at least 3 different direction changes. I think, all right, okay, let's see what's going on. So I start to run, and we train this in the program. I start to run a counter surveillance route, right? And so I suddenly stop and change direction. I get in the flow going the other way, and I go back in the other direction. And I don't notice them immediately because I'm just being careful. I don't want them to know I know. In fact, believe it or not, right now I'm having a little bit of fun. replaying the skills, right?
Yeah.
And so about a block later, I realize they're back there behind me. There are about 6 or 7 people back, but they're still with me. So I jaywalk. I cross the street in the middle of right, and I go over. Now, right now, I'm not going to my restaurant because I don't want to lead them there and then sit in there for an hour and then come out when it's dark and get ambushed. So I'm just running this route, an SDR, surveillance detection route, and they're with me. So as I'm moving, they kind of close up a little more, and I notice one of them, as they get up, and there are 2 or 3 people behind, I notice that a couple of times his head does this. And I'm thinking, what's he looking at? And then I realize I had stuck my cell phone in my back left pocket of my jeans, okay? They wanted my cell phone. They were trying to get up close enough to pick my pocket and get my cell phone. So as I'm moving, I pulled my phone out, pretended to look at it, stuck it and I'm watching in the window of a shop next to me as we're moving in this crowd, stuck it in my front pocket, and I watched one look at the other guy, shrug his shoulders, and they both left.
No kidding.
No kidding. That's the power of awareness.
Huh.
They weren't in this case intending to do violence.
Yeah, they just wanted your stuff.
They wanted my cell phone.
Huh. Interesting.
So the two primary things are, first, situational awareness, which means more than what people, you have to be properly trained. And the second thing is if your intuition tells you something is wrong, we talk a lot about this in the book. Dan talks a lot about this book, and we talk a lot about it in the online training course. If your intuition tells you something is wrong, we want you to believe it. Right? We want you to believe it.
Don't talk yourself out of it either.
Do not, because that's what you'll do.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, especially women. I just want to say it out loud, women. Your intuition is there for a reason, and you have good intuition, and you should never justify doing something your intuition tells you not to do just to be nice. Ever. I would rather be not nice and wrong and alive than...
You will, if you read the book or you take the online training program, well, you read the book as part of the online training program, you will meet several women, live case studies that Dan, the author Dan Schilling, did, where that is exactly what they said. I knew I shouldn't, but I didn't want to be rude.
Yep, I know. let's tell people where they can go. It's mypoa.org, right?
mypoa.org, yes. Or if you are a member of Armed Women of America or the National Tactical Officers Association or Winning Mind Training out of Canada, um, those are our affiliates. Or Warrior Creed. You can go to Warrior Creed US and you can get a discounted price on the online training program.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
would be a good place for people to start because there is actual training that you provide online, plus they can buy the book, right?
Right. They
And
get an ebook or they can buy a printed copy
oh,
when they
perfect.
order it. And then key to this is there are 6 actual exercises at the end of each block
Hmm.
where we have you go out, and do what we've talked about to
Yeah.
learn how to make that a part of your daily rhythm.
Yeah. Applying it is so important.
Right.
I
It
did
is.
an early on when this first came on my radar, I did an audit of myself.
Hmm.
And it was quite eye-opening when I actually had awareness of what I was doing. Like
Right.
what I did when I first got in my car, which was
Hmm.
look at my phone with the
Hmm.
doors unlocked, creating
Hmm.
possibly an opportunity. When I was looking at my phone and when I wasn't paying attention and when I was, all of those kinds of things I did an audit years ago. And it actually kind of scared me because I realized how many opportunities I could have been giving to people if they would have been paying attention to what I wasn't.
Right.
And
Right.
so I guess for me, it was flipping it. I flipped it as much as I can flip it because I don't have ill intentions towards people. I always want to think the best of people. But for me to get into the mindset of a predator versus prey and think, watch other people and see what they're doing, and then also audit myself, evaluate myself, and think, well, where are your weaknesses and how can you improve on those? That was really helpful for me.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think it was General Mattis who said, "Be nice to everyone you meet, but have a plan to kill them."
Hmm.
Um, there's that sounds extreme, but there's some validity in that, and that
Yeah.
is, look, be nice to everyone you meet, but be aware, be recognize that being ready to defend yourself or others at any given time
Yeah.
is important. We talk very much in the Power of Awareness, so we'll show you um, how to read people.
Mm.
We talk about how you read. We talk about the importance of understanding what a sneer is, and
Oh,
how that simple facial expression is clearly indicative that you are about to be prey.
yeah.
And so we talk about those kinds of things. So,
I want to dig into that. Well, we're running out of time for the interview, but I do want to encourage everyone to go to the Power of Awareness book and online training. You can go there at mypoa.org. You can also check out warriorcreed.us. So go to both of those websites and learn everything that you can. There's a lot of good resources. Randy, you've explained them so well. I really want to take that course. So
mhm.
I think that that would be a great thing to do, you guys, over the winter. At least in Montana, there's not as much gun training going on in Montana in the winter. This would be a great course to take
Yeah,
during the cold months.
same here in Utah. Yeah, same here in Utah.
Oh,
That'd be
I was thinking you're
the
in
online.
Arizona.
No, I'm in
Oh,
Utah. I'm in northern Utah in the Ogden area,
oh,
straight down I-15 from you.
no
So
kidding. I didn't
yeah,
know you were that close.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's great.
And so that program, the online training program, the online video training and the training blocks total is only an hour 47 minutes.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then you do the exercises. We have you go out for 30, 45 minutes in your daily schedule. Go to these kinds of places, and
Yeah.
nothing bad or anything,
Yeah.
and then apply these skills and see
Yeah.
how you feel. And
Yeah.
there are 6 different exercises we have you do.
I love that. That's great.
Hmm.
That's going to help people. So, as we wrap up, because unfortunately we always have limited time,
Oh,
although I would
sure.
love to continue talking with you, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to, or any final thoughts that you have for the audience?
No, I think you do. I think we've done great. I think, I'm happy to come back anytime. But I would like to applaud you and your audience. I'd like this whole concept of Defenders
Oh,
USA. I think it's important.
it is.
I think it's important that the 10% of us who are willing to do these things um, are willing to train, to talk, to discuss, to identify each other's needs, help each other accomplish things.
Yeah.
More and more and more, I think we're coming to understand that we need to be capable of caring for ourselves and our others, that we are, in fact, our own first responder. I think we need to take advantage of places like Gunsight, places like various other training entities, and there are a number of very good ones. There's some up there in Montana as well. Although you're kind of limited on the time of year you can actually do anything up there.
I'm not
Anyway,
afraid to train in the winter. It's everyone else that wusses out.
well, given my background, I'm past the point of having to practice being miserable in my
Yeah, I
life.
bet.
So
Yeah.
yeah, when I'm training, like next month, January and February, I'll be in Arizona training.
Okay.
But anyway, down in Phoenix, because Prescott, where Gunsight is still too cold in January for me, January, February. Anyway, I think if you do that, I think if you realize that this defender's mindset is a way of life, not just something you're doing for a period of time, you can still be my age, and I'm way up there, and you can still be doing the things you need to keep your skills up.
Very appreciated. I can't thank you enough for your time, Randy.
No, I
I've
appreciate the
really
opportunity
enjoyed
to be
this.
with you.
This is
Yeah.
too much fun. I can't believe I get to do this. I cannot believe I get to do this.
I'm glad you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that I showed up messy and uncomfortable and not knowing what I was doing 2 years ago and just kept putting in the work.
Yeah, I
It's
love
really
it.
worth it. It's
I
worth
love
it.
it.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're quite welcome.